In defense of the farmer, KCAU-TV, Sioux City, Iowa, produced a special programming to tell the cattleman's story in a year of turmoil in the marketplace, as seen by the producer in his feedlot, at the marketplace, and in the nation's capital.
It has to be discouraging to someone who's thinking about going into agriculture. When taking thought of what you want to do in the future, you like to go into industry which you think the people, appreciate. And it is hard to go into agriculture when the people aren't backing us as they are now. It's hard to believe that people think the farmer can actually set these prices when actually it's just supply and demand. The farmer, he hasn't a thing to do with it.
The major weak spot in our fight against inflation is in the area of meat prices. What we need is action that will stop the rise in meat prices now. Meat prices must not go higher. And with the help of the housewife and the farmer, they can and they should go down.
Well, they go to boycott. America. They go to boycott. They go to fight it.
It happens in early spring, a meat price freeze and a nationwide boycott. The farmer being blamed for high grocery store prices on beef and pork, an outcry generated by an apparent lack of understanding on the part of the American housewife.
It's starting with the meat boycott.
Okay, but you're starting at the wrong end. You should be starting at the scale where they are getting too much, not down here where we aren't hardly breaking even.
Going to get hurt is the farmer who grows your food.
You're going to almost yourself into starvation because the farmers cannot.
Do I look like I'm starving?
No. So why are you complaining about the price of food?
Okay, but I will
Eat a
be.
little less.
Do I look like I have to eat a little less? No, honey, not at 108 pounds.
For the Iowa farmer, who produces most of the nation's meat, the boycotts and the price freeze sparked a unified response. There are counter-boycotts staged by the farmers, their wives, and future farmers. A defense of the farmer begins.
I'd like to invite them to come out to my farm sometime and have them do what my father does or my brother does for a day or a week. And then I think you wouldn't have to tell them a thing. I think they'd know.
Realizing the gravity of the situation and the threat against their industry, a delegation of livestock feeders converged on Washington, where the boycotters at congressional hearings bring in the big guns to force the meat price rollback. Ralph Nader and Betty Fernez lead the pack, attacking the farmer as the villain in the price rise. Farmers wanting to respond could not, and remained outside the hearings telling the press their side of the story.
I feel that they absolutely failed to see the big picture in there today. They're using the boycott as an issue to put the blame on the high cost of food, and particularly on the cost of meat, as an immediate concern. Had they been able to see the problems that we have as livestock feeders in the Corn Belt area and in the South and Southwest, and been more well-versed, been able to sit down intelligently and discuss the opposition problems, I think they would realize that they're not talking about meat on the table today. They're talking about whether their children or their grandchildren have meat in the future. My great concern was here today that they were asking us to increase production, when at the same time we're rapidly losing livestock feeders from the farm, when we are having a suppressed feeling in the Corn Belt area because of the fact that we're now confronted with this H.R. 6168 bill, which we violently oppose at this time. The fact in here today at this hearing was that these people did not realize the other side of the picture and that we are not encouraging young people to get back into the farming business.
We're not a nut and bolt type society where if they say, well, we don't want it, we can't put it up on the shelf like a box of shoes, nor can we put it up there like a can of corn. This is a perishable product, and this product is ready for market today. So it just isn't something that you can turn on and shut off.
I don't think they understand the fact that first thing I don't think they understand is the fact that the meat that's in the counter today, that's all there is.
Where's the cowboy?
These calves that are being produced, this is the meat we're going to have in 12 months. There's going to be no more. We can't double the meat that's there. They don't understand that either. So all we're really doing now is just frightening the farmers into keeping fewer cows, and that means less beef in 2 years. But there's nothing we can do in Congress today to change the supply of meat. That's there. We are going to lower the supply in 2 years, and that means raising the prices, and that's what the housewife's done with her boycott. Not lower the price, she's raising the price.
None. And if, when 6 months later...
While the farmers, including a delegation from Sioux County, Iowa, are outnumbered by boycott advocates in moves to pressure Congress on the meat price issue, they scatter out, meeting with lawmakers. The Sioux Countyans even go a step further. Hawarden Mayor Harlan Hummel moderates the discussion with Washington, D.C. boycott organizers. A move toward conciliation and understanding begins.
And I'd like to see this resolved without another boycott coming up. And the best way to stop boycotts is for people to get together and talk. Dialogue is excellent. Because my family, my wife boycotted meat for last week. I'm president of the association, and by Jupiter, the federation voted to join the boycott, so we can't have meat. But by not having meat, this is the first time in our life since we've been married we've gone through without meat. She had a lot of these little funny recipes that appeared in the paper. Now, some of those recipes I liked. You see the sad thing, some of them I liked. So now, even if we don't boycott anymore, we're not going to have red meat 7 days a week if we've had it in the past. We're going to have red meat maybe 5 days a week. But what happened is that that's going to be a loss to some people who I think are innocent in performing. But what I'm saying to you is people do not have to eat red meat. And if people don't eat red meat, then the farmers are going to be hurt, particularly when to do this. So my point is, let's reason together and ascertain if we can prevent this from happening by prices being lowered in some kind of way. Because, see, I am not poor, thank God, but there are poor people out there who can't buy a steak at $1.79. They cannot buy a hamburger at $85. And we're concerned about those people.
We tried to talk to managers to find out why. They said it was the farmers. When we read in the papers, the farmers say it's the middleman. I don't know really what the middleman is. If any of you here are middlemen, I'd like to hear the farmers in your group explain to the middleman why he's taking so much of your profit.
Now you talk about the high price of meat. 2 weeks ago, if you'd have come to, I run a market, and I sell livestock for people. If you'd have come into my market, you could have bought a 1,000-pound animal, which would be a heifer, fat, for 44 cents a pound. Cost you $440. You could have taken that to a processor, and it would probably cost you in the neighborhood of $60 to process that animal. We'll just say $100. So it costs you $540 for that particular animal, and if you process it, you'd have about 600 pounds of meat, including the bone. All right, that 600 pounds of meat would last a family perhaps a year for a family of man and wife and 2 or 3 children. He'd have to buy some extras beside, like wieners and bacon. But he could put that in his freezer and he'd have a year's supply of good meat. All right, and you take that same meat and you go through the regular channels from the packer to the wholesaler to the retailer and into the supermarket. And you put it in these packages that's got the price on, it's going to cost you double. Because of all the labor that it took to put that in that supermarket.
This is one of 12,000 feedlots in the state of Iowa. It might be a little over average as far as the amount of cattle we feed here. We've got 240 acres of land, and what feed we raise here, we feed it all through to our cattle. Now, we buy cattle from in South Dakota and from mostly out west, We buy them at the average weight of somewhere between 600 and 700 pounds. And we keep them here then until they weigh from 11.5 to 1,200 pounds. Now, when we buy these cattle out there, we've got to pay so many dollars. Usually right now, why, the price of a 700-pound steer would be about 50 cents a pound, which runs into a lot of dollars volume to initiate the business. When we sell our cattle fat, why, they bring, right now they would bring about 42, 43. But our operation hinges around the weight that we put on these cattle. Our primary purpose then is to feed grain, feed Iowa-raised grain and silage and hay to these cattle at a cost so that our markup and our profit ends up in the amount of weight at an efficient cost that we can put on these cattle. Now, we raise around here, it's mostly corn. I raise corn and I put it in these silos, and we keep our cattle we start our cattle on what is known as a roughage growing ration, where they get more silage than they do corn, and then they're gradually switched over to less roughage and more corn to put the quality of beef on the animal that the housewife wants. Now, this whole process takes about 150 days when we're talking about a 600 to 700 pound animal. Now, the cost of our feed that we put on the animal varies from year to year. Now, this year, the cost of feed went up tremendously. When we're feeding this roughage and this corn, we've got to supplement it with protein. And this protein is bought commercially, and it more than doubled. It tripled in price in some cases this year. So there is an additional cost this year that we weren't prepared for, as well as the weather cost. Now, weather was terrifically bad around here for feeding. It just was not conducive to good gains. Now, we fed the same amount of feed to the cattle, but the cattle, because of the mud and the high humidity, they did not put the gains on. So the cattle are weighing less at this time of year than they would normally under good feeding conditions. We do have a good demand for beef, and had the gains been average this winter, why, there would be more beef for the housewife at this time. But those circumstances are some of the things that enter into the higher cost of meat of recent months. The total investment is almost double what it was 10 years ago. Now, our raw materials, and I like to think of our feeder cattle as a raw material. Now, we're paying twice as much for our feeder cattle. In other words, a 500-pound feeder steer from out in Montana would cost $150 more today than it would 2 years ago. Our fixed costs, of course, remain relatively constant, but our operating costs have gone up terrifically. Now, just for instance, now I'm dealing on a wagon to feed my cattle to. It's going to cost $6,500. Now, we're doing this because we've got to more efficiently compete with the commercial feedlots down in Texas. This wagon will have scales on, and I weigh all my feed, and it does a real good job of mixing the feed up for these cattle. This should have been done probably many years ago, but 10 or 15 years ago, we were doing the same operation on less volume, but all with a scoop shovel. And obviously our operating cost was less then. But in order to compete in today's beef economy, we've got to be more efficient. And to get this efficiency, we're going to have to go out and spend some money. And this feed wagon that I'm telling you about is just one example of the tremendous costs that are incurred by the cattle feeder of Iowa today.
I don't want the farmers or anyone else to lose money. This is America, and we have to work together. We have to help one another. But I do know this. Another boycott is not going to help anybody.
Well, I think the next step is basically this, that I don't think there should be any let-up on pressure that's been applied by the individual livestock feed in the Corn Belt area, and I might say the South and Southwest as well, to constantly put pressure on the congressmen and senators to let them know the basic problem. And I see the basic problem as two things. Number one, the morale of the livestock feeder is low across the country. It wasn't this way 3 weeks ago, Jolene. But it's low now because they feel that this rollback has had them in a state of confusion, the packers in a state of confusion, and
Consequently, we are indicating to that feeder and giving him a desire to suppress his increased production. The only way this country can assure the consumer back there of having available supply of meat is for us to increase production. We're not a bolt and nut factory. You can't turn this thing off and on. The severe weather conditions, the great demand for our product has caused us to have a vacuum at the present time. And as I stood in the hearings with Congressman Rosenthal and the boycott women, I was disenchanted to the fact that they did not know the big picture. They did not see what could happen, that beefless days and meatless days could be coming up in the next year or two. And I think this is the thing that we tried to get across. Incidentally, we broke up into groups. We went to all the supermarkets in Washington, D.C. We told the story to the housewife, shook hands with them, explained our situation. And you know, out of the many groups that were out there, not one put the blame on the livestock feeder. It came from a disenchanted press back east and from politicians who are using it as a political football. And I think if we did anything back there, and I say the feeders, they're the ones that did it. We did anything at all, we made them aware that this 4% of the population is a heck of a lot more important than they realize.
10, 20, 20, and now 30, 20, 30, now 40. And $3, 310, 310, 120, 120. $40, 50. And a fat cow. 30, 50, 75. 30, 50, 75.
KCAU, Channel 9 in Sioux City, is proud to have shared this livestock story with you. It's but a part of KCAU's continued efforts to serve you, our friends and viewers.